And then all of a sudden, all of that flooding of our economy with cash just was translated into a dramatic increase in imports, and the fiscal stimulus was lost nearly immediately, and the residue was an extraordinary and growing level of debt. So by 1987, our debt-to-GNP ratio was hitting 130%. Every cent that we earned on income tax was used to pay the interest. We had unemployment of 17%. That's despite the fact that about 200,000 people emigrated. Of those left, 17% still couldn't get a job. 12% were long-term unemployed. They hadn't been employed for over a year. Today, in 2007, I'll use the data from the European Union. Our GDP per capita is 145% of the European norm. We're the second highest, and Luxembourg is the only one that's highest on an earnings basis. Our debt to GNP ratio is 25%. That's net after our savings. We have a pension reserve fund. Our unemployment was at 4.5%, which is very close to as low as it can get, because there are structural reasons where it can't go much below that. And our long-term unemployment level is 1.4%. And perhaps the most interesting metric for a country that's exported people all of its life, about 15% of the workforce and people in work are now from outside of the country. So we've had an enormous wave of inward migration. Not Irish people coming home, but Poles, Chinese, Lithuanians. We're a country now that's multicultural and multi-ethnic, from a country that was mono-ethnic, monocolour, and monotonous. We are different. Sorry. Just a little growth. You can see the growth has changed a lot. In the 70s, we joined the Union, we got a fillip. We got the oil shocks brought us down. In 77, 78, we started pouring money into the economy, so we got a bit of growth. All of that was washed out of the economy and ends up with negative economic growth through the mid-80s. That's when our people left. Full classes from engineering college left. Whole classes, everybody left. And the view in Ireland was, in the late 70s, will the last person who leaves, please turn off the lights. We had film cameras out at our airports. We had families crying as their children left. They were going away, perhaps never to come back, because that's the memory of emigration in our society. We had a huge diaspora, and there was a sense of hopelessness. We started doing our social programs, our partnership programs, in 87. We got an immediate growth, and then things went a little slow in 1991. And after that, we went into a virtuous circle that has absolutely transformed our economy, and we struggle to understand and to come to terms with the extraordinary transformation. We were like a sleeping dog waiting to wake up and perform. How do we do it? I think that EU and sovereignty was really, really important. We're a small island. We defined ourselves against Britain. All of a sudden, we're in Europe. We had sovereignty. And what does sovereignty mean? Sovereignty means control. Control of what? Control of your future. We blamed the Brits for all of our problems in the 80s. The reason that we were poor was because of the famine. Well, that was during British domination. The reason that we were poor because we didn't have any industries. That's because of the trade wars. The reason that we were poor, we all looked to Britain for all the explanations of our failure. And all of a sudden, we stopped looking to Britain. We started saying, well, actually, during our period of sovereignty, our fiscal expansionism, well, actually, that's part of our problem. And that was our creation. And we started realizing the reason that we were a failed society was because of things that we were doing. And, it took us a long time to suddenly click that maybe if we started doing things correctly, maybe we wouldn't be a failed society. And that was a really important element. So social partnership was bred out of the fact that our country was failed. The platform was burning, the IMF were going to come in, and by God, we better do something to fix it. So it wasn't that suddenly somebody said, let's do social partnership. The agreements and the policies came from a burning platform, not from virtue, not from great intellect, but from a burning platform where we realised we had no other options. Fiscal policy was an element of what we did, and without it we couldn't have achieved it. We had to arrest the burgeoning debt to GNP ratio, which was by our chronic problems with a budget deficit that was increasing on an annual basis. And if we didn't arrest that, we were hawking our future. We were selling our future, so we had to stop it. Education was a critical element, and I'll go through these in a little bit more. Labour markets, economic infrastructure, industrial development and leadership. So we'll just go through some of these. The Union, we joined the Union in '72. Perhaps the most important thing the Union gave us was a single market. Ireland is a small little country, a poor country. So all of a sudden we were joined and members of one of the wealthiest, richest marketplaces in the world. Irish companies selling into these markets, and we had to take the CaPRI. When you join the Union, you have to take loads of regulations. There's millions of pieces of acts of parliament you must bring through and secondary pieces of legislation. But what they did was they bring to the local market all of the rules of selling into the single market. So all of our producers had to upgrade what they did, and they had to develop skill sets and quality control measures that were applied domestically, and once they could sell them domestically, they could sell them into Germany or France. So all of a sudden, we were part of a very big and wealthy club. We had to significantly upgrade our regulatory infrastructure, taking in all of the rules from Europe. We started moving from having a dependency on sterling that we were linked to, practicing with an independent currency, and today we're a member of the euro. And it is wonderful being a member of the euro, because no longer can we, as a people, the senior politicians, the administrators, no longer can they allow inflation to creep up and then try to catch up with it by changing the currency's value. It's gone. You can't use that. You have to fix competitiveness at the source. And you have to be honest and deal with the problems. Our labour markets were being transformed by being part of the union, and one of the most important elements of labour market transformation was the rights of women in the labour force. We were educating our women brilliantly, but all of our rules were encouraging them to leave the labour force. So if I was to go back to that chart of economic growth, if I plotted female participation rates, they would mirror the economic growth rates. And why is that? It's not because economic growth allowed women to perform. It's because women participating fully in our labour force enabled us to grow our economy. We were using the full squad of Ireland Inc. rather than half the squad of Ireland Inc. Being a member of the union meant that we were all going around meeting our colleagues all across Europe and learning from them. Not taking their models, but learning what did the Dutch do? How did the Danes solve local councils and local authorities? So what we found is by pooling our sovereignty in the European Union, we were actually deepening our own sovereignty. We'd lived for years in this false sense of that we're an independent country. But independent to what? Independent to be poor and to be failed. We pooled our sovereignty, we joined a bigger marketplace, we gave over certain levers of government, and yet we had a much richer sovereignty. So the levers that we did pull had a much greater impact. And we benefited from fiscal transfers from Europe. I mention this because many people think that the Celtic Tiger, that's what it's sometimes called, was really just a big transfer of money from Germany. The analysis that has been done independently suggests that the net impact of fiscal transfers was about 3% of our GNP. So I said we're at 145% of average GNP per capita. So take 3 off that, and that's the fiscal transfers. So the fiscal transfers do not explain. They helped us, they showed solidarity, but they didn't cause the transformation. Social partnership. And as was said earlier, we have agreements, and agreements started really taking place in '87. Many years before the agreements, we produced a National Economic and Social Council under the Prime Minister's office that different stakeholders in our society, what people traditionally call social partners, unions and the employers,